by the coronavirus and amplified by the most recent acts of injustice. People around the world are coming together with greater urgency to demand action. At Bank of America, we know we all have a role to play to overcome the very real consequences of systemic racism and inequity. This includes individuals, governments, nonprofits, and the private sector. Racial equality and economic opportunity are deeply connected. That's why Bank of America has committed $1 billion over 4 years to address critical gaps in affordable housing, access to healthcare, employment and job skills, and the resources small businesses need to succeed. We can do more, and we need to do more now to further advance racial equality and economic opportunity for all.
America. And on behalf of all of the employees at Bank of America, I'd like to welcome you to this session on statewide equity in education. I'd like to thank so much SVP for this important discussion and for bringing this incredible lineup of leaders for today's panel discussion. As Commissioner Morath shared, equity in our system requires both love for students, but also a relentless focus on achievement. Rigor and alignment throughout our system is required to help students be successful and have the skills they need for the jobs of the future. As the commissioner shared, COVID has adversely impacted low-income students, exacerbating issues that were present even pre-COVID. I look forward to hearing more about the innovative solutions that our district leaders have put into place on some of these issues. For years, Bank of America leaders across Texas have partnered with businesses and shared their own time and resources to help students in public education. In June, Bank of America made a $1 billion 4-year commitment to advance racial equity and economic opportunity by focusing on 4 key areas that include higher education, upskilling and reskilling for the jobs of the future, focusing on the effects of COVID in underserved communities, as well as equity investments in Black and Hispanic-owned businesses. This new investment comes on a foundation of a $15 million investment that we've made in education and workforce over the last 5 years. Our focus has included our own Student Leaders Initiative and partnering with local mayors on summer jobs programs. These are paid internships for high school students that we moved completely to virtual this year. We've partnered with organizations like Communities in Schools, Breakthrough, Commit, and many others across the state. I'm so thrilled to see this wonderful group of leaders today, especially Dr. Elizalde, who just joined us a few months ago in Austin Independent School District. It's so great to have you in Austin. And of course, she joins Dr. Hinojosa, Dr. Martinez, and Dr. Latham for this very important discussion today. Eva, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Eva Marie Ayala. I'm the education editor at the new Ed Lab at the Dallas Morning News. And I've covered education for about 16 years or so. And you know, sometimes it's easy for me to get frustrated that I'm writing the same stories about achievement gaps. I'm writing the same stories about Black and Latino men having a harder time accessing talented and gifted programs and the disparities that are out there, the digital divide. But right now, I want to focus a little bit on some of the progress we've made. You know, I look at this panel and it's a panel full of people of color, you know, Blacks and Latinos here, 2 women who are superintendents. And, you know, myself, I wouldn't imagine moderating this panel, you know, when I was in high school. So we've made some progress. So before we get to what's keeping us up at night, you know, let's talk a little bit about some of the efforts that we're doing and some of the progress that we're making. So Pedro, let's start with you. Let's talk a little bit about Target 2020. If you can, you know, briefly talk about, you know, where you stand on your efforts to address equity and how COVID has kind of shaped that a little bit.
Thank you, Eva. You know, I'm very proud of our district. I've been here now 6 years. We have now closed the gap with both our suburban and urban peers in terms of we're now a B district, up from being an F district 5 years ago. We are, of course, a district that have not only 97% of our children are children of color, but we also have almost 70% of the poverty of our entire county. So our district is very dense in poverty. I always say they take the poorest portions of Dallas, Houston, and Austin, put them in one district, that's our district. And for us, you know, when we look at the fact that we've closed the gap with college readiness, in other words, children that are testing college ready and the SAT, ACT, and the TSI, the percentage of children attending college, not just the children getting accepted into college, over 80% of my grads are now being accepted into college, but we've closed the gap with both our state and county. And so for me, we're still, I use a baseball analogy, we're in the 4th to 5th inning of our work. But what I see that's happening in our district is we're gonna show our state and the nation what it takes to really serve under children of high poverty, but have amazing potential. In other words, my children are low income, but they are rich when it comes to potential and perseverance. And so, you know, and of course, you know, I know my colleagues are doing also courageous work in their district. So I'm just honored to be here with the panel.
So Dr. Lathan, y'all have recently launched Achieve 180, right? You're a couple of years in. Can you talk a little bit about where you are in that process and how it's kind of changed a little bit with COVID?
Thank you for the opportunity to present today, and to my colleagues, it's great being with you. We are actually a B-rated district also, with over 280 campuses and around 209,000 students, although enrollment is down as it relates to COVID. So we're missing about 13,000 students right now. Achieve 180 was launched 3 years ago. Now we're entering into our 4th year, where we targeted at that time what we were our F-rated or our IR campuses, improvement required or formally improvement required campuses. And what we did is we provided the board actually approved around $24 million to support those campuses, providing additional positions, additional professional development, stipends for principals and teachers that actually went to those campuses. And our goal was not only to turn those campuses around, but build capacity on those campuses. And one of the longest running improvement required or F-rated campuses at that time, Cashmere High School, was one of the campuses, of course, that received additional support. And they were able to move from F-rated status 2 years ago under our accountability rating and the support. And we have a number of campuses that have not only moved from F rating, but moved into C, B status. And we're very proud of what those campuses have accomplished. We still have a lot of work to do, and COVID, unfortunately, has set us back. But I will tell you what's amazing as it relates even to COVID, the students on our Achieve 180 campuses, they are returning to their campuses for face-to-face instruction. Very pleased that as a district, we have been able, for every child and parent that requested a device, we were able to put a device in their hands. And so right now we have about 130,000 devices that we have deployed out to our families. And in addition to that, hotspots. The issue we're facing though is around social emotional support and health. And that's what's impacting us as a district as it relates to COVID. And through some resources with our city, through the CARES Act, we've been able to provide some resources for our family. But we still have a lot of work to do with Achieve 180, but we have made some accomplishments. So Pedro said he's in the 4th inning. I'd say we're in the 4th, moving to the 5th inning also.
All right, so Dr. Elizalde, you recently moved from Dallas to Austin ISD. You've been there a couple of months now, so I'm sure you've solved all the problems since you've been there. But you know, looking at Austin, y'all are just in the draft stage of your equity plan. Can you tell us a little bit about what some of the key highlights are for the equity plan and what you're hearing since you've got to Austin about what the community wants to be included in that?
Thanks for that question, Eva. I think that certainly Austin has had equity at the forefront of their planning for many, many years. And they've recently done just a fabulous job of, the board has come together with a strategic framework that specifically calls equity to be a common thread throughout all of the decision-making that we follow here in our district. So some of the priorities that we're focused focused on start, which I think is probably most appropriate during this pandemic, is the student emotional and academic well-being. We all know that, and I'm going to steal from Dr. Hinojosa, I can't help it. I'm going to sound sometimes like him, but that's just the way this is going to go sometimes. Culture trumps strategy every day of the week, because if we don't have that environment that is conducive to learning, it's going to make the academic achievement that we know our children, that we know our scholars are capable of, becomes even more elusive. So Austin has spent a significant amount of dollars in staffing and professional development for social emotional learning, specifically around cultural relevancy, cultural proficiency, to the point of even redoing curriculum lessons with regard to an infusion of culturally relevant type of resources, so that our scholars are able to access those types of pieces of literature and so on. The other item is about how we connect those high expectations with a plan that allows them to be achieved. So we have an equity office here in Austin, and our equity officer, Dr. Stephanie Hawley, is a part of all of our leadership team meetings. She works with campuses as well as the school board. So the pandemic has absolutely, I think, highlighted the disparities that Austin has been working so hard to minimize. And it has, as I think one of my colleagues said earlier, it has given us, unfortunately, we've taken a step backwards. And it's going to take a lot of resources and a lot of very intentional work to overcome this. But on a positive note, our staff, our team members, our parents, our students are truly the heroes of this pandemic, as they continue to recognize how important education is for them. And we too have had, especially at the elementary level, numbers of students and parents who are accessing on-campus, in-person instruction, as well as those that are accessing our remote instruction.
Dr. Hinojosa, Dallas has gotten a lot of attention in the last couple of years for various efforts that y'all put in place, from the ACE program, to TEI. What are some of the things you're most proud of in terms of addressing equity, and how has COVID kind of either derailed that or shined a light into, some of the efforts that y'all are working on?
Well, thanks for having me, Eva, and you look great. You look fantastic. And my 3 friends that are on the call, I only have 5 friends, and 3 of them are on this call. So that's pretty amazing that you put us all together. Yeah, we've had some success, and Stephanie was a big part of that. She was my warrior that got things done. She handled everything I didn't want to handle, so she deserves all the credit. We have had some success in spite of the odds. We have, I was looking at a sheet the other day, there's only like 5 districts in the country that have more economically disadvantaged students than us, percentage-wise. Nobody has more English learners than us, percentage-wise. We have 47% English learners. We have 70,000 English learners. That's more students than El Paso has, more students than San Antonio has. And yet, despite that, we don't use demography as a crutch. We take and we add value to the lives of our students. You mentioned some of the things that we were successful with. When I got here, when Stephanie and I took over, we had 43 schools that were F. We've gotten every one of them off. The reason I got rid of Stephanie is because she kept letting schools come back on. We got 4 back on or 7 back on. So she had to go somewhere else, because if you don't do well in Dallas, you can't stay. So hopefully she'll get something done in Austin. But I'm watching you, Stephanie. You better do something. Effort is good, results are better. Quit talking on these Zoom calls, go do something. And also our strategic compensation has been very powerful. And that's nothing but equity. We put the best teachers in front of the toughest schools with the greatest principals. I'm embarrassed to tell you that we had one school, Tice Elementary School, for 14 years, and 10 of those under my watch was an F school. This year they're a blue ribbon school. Same kids, same parents, same neighborhoods. What's the difference? We have a great principal and great teachers, and we pay them a lot of money, and they change the culture and they deliver. And we have the most, I don't believe in the A through F, I call them accomplished schools. We have our own local accountability. We have the most accomplished schools, and it's more than just the STAR test, because we measure the culture and the climate, because you cannot succeed based on just the STAR test. You have to have all these other systems. All of that doesn't matter. The thing I'm the most proud of, because it's nothing but equity, and everybody's been talking about equity for years. Some people want to talk about it, some people want to do it. When I was superintendent 1.0, I'm embarrassed to tell you that only 15% of our kids graduated with and went and got any kind of post-secondary credential 6 years after graduating from high school. Today, in this year, in spite of the pandemic, in 2021, 15% of our kids are going to graduate from high school with an associate's degree before the 6-year clock starts. And that's because of our P-TECH programs with Dallas College and our industry partners. And you know what? I'm not going to use the pandemic as an excuse. You think I'm going to let, Stephanie, do you think I'm going to let your former teammates off the hook because we got something called a pandemic? We had a tornado, and we didn't slow down. Pandemic, como que pandemic? We got kids to take care of. Ain't no pandemic that's going to stop us. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
All right. Well, so now we're in this pandemic, and it's really shined a light on some of the digital divides that we have, on the access that families have to healthcare, to social services, and it's something that I know people watching this and are participating have been well aware of for a long time. But you couple that on top of this social justice moment that we had in the summer, where we had, despite the public health concerns, folks were coming out, hundreds of folks, thousands of folks were coming out to just express their frustration and how, Black men were being treated across the country. And we had institutions and school districts across the state, across the nation, pass resolutions saying, we're affirming our commitment to helping our Black students. But despite all that, we still have these gaps. We still have these major gaps where Black students, particularly Black men, are so far behind their peers in having access to talented and gifted programs. In terms of disparity, what is changing for you now in addressing those gaps? And why has it taken at this moment to do it? And what are you doing that's different? Pedro, let's start with you.
So I guess what I would say, Eva, is that, and maybe it's because of the way we do our work, and I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but I think at least for me, we do the work, and then unfortunately sometimes we don't talk about it a lot because we're too busy doing it. And so what I tell people is, welcome to the party. So go look at videos of South Texas, of the amount of racism and discrimination and the way children were failed over and over again. And it was okay. And so, I know that in our district, we reflected that 6 years ago. So now where we're at today is, yes, the pandemic is with us, but I'm with Michael. For me, all it does is now that I see people marching, I'm like, well, welcome, because we've been fighting this fight, and it's about time. And it's about time that people stand up. So for example, in our district, we distributed, devices to 80% of our children, because 80% of our children didn't have devices. The vast majority didn't have internet access. And we said, no more, nada más, that's it, basta. We're done with that. I have about, in terms of property tax value, we're less than 10% of Austin and Houston. We're less than 15% of Dallas. But here we are, going for, and I know Michael's already beat me on this, but at least our largest bond proposition that includes the technology proposition, 1.3 billion with a B, the highest this county or city or any district has ever done in my area, even though we're a fraction of tax values across the state, because we said no more, that's it. And so either people are gonna actually walk the talk, or they're gonna keep talking. And for us, so what our plan is, Eva, is with these two ballot questions, our academics are we've already again narrowed the gap with my colleagues in the region and my urban colleagues. Now is to make sure that our facilities and technology efforts, that they reflect the academics, that our children going forward never have to be without a device, never have to be without internet access. So to me, I really feel like it's about walking the talk now. And I know my colleagues are also, they walk the talk. So for me, for everybody else, welcome to the party.
So Dr. Latham, why do you think there's been this, momentum right now, and what's going to change for you? Pedro mentioned that, they were able to get technology devices into kids' hands with a matter of time. I've seen that in districts across the state. So why didn't that happen before? Why couldn't we do that before the pandemic?
Well, I want to focus on actually what we were doing before the pandemic and actually talk about in response to the things that have occurred over the past few months. So 3 years ago, we started a program called Ascending to Men that focuses on boys of color. So not only African-American male, but Hispanic males in our district. We provide our students in Ascending to Male in the program with mentors. So we have African-American males, Hispanic males actually getting in front of our students, providing them with mentorship, providing academic support, college visits, also teaching them the value of giving back to the community, and then also counseling and an outlet for them to grow from boys to men. We also were very blessed 2 years now, we're in our second year, one of our local senators, Senator Boris Miles, was able to get us another grant to support what we call the Miles Scholars Program. And this program is geared for students at a Cashmere High School, Wheatley High School, some of our underserved communities, where those young men start in their 9th grade and they are cohort and grouped together for all of their academic and core courses. And they are together for the 4 years of their high school. So we're in the second year of that program. So let's talk about the George Floyd incident. And you say, why were things not happening? The painful piece for me as a leader is, number one, being from Houston. Number two, George Floyd having actually attended Yates High School was, for me, what do I say to our young men in Ascending to Men and Miles Scholars? Because we've told them, if you do the right thing, if you get a quality education, that you can go on and be successful in life. So it's very painful to have the experience and watch that, and to continue to watch the things that we've seen over the past several months. And so I agree with Pedro, welcome to the party, but the party doesn't end, and people think it ends on November 3rd. People have been encouraged to go out and vote, but the conversation is just beginning. And so it'll be interesting to see, people saying everything about what they're going to do. I'd like to see those same people out 6 months from now, marching with us as it relates to our funding that we are seeing diminishing as a result of our attendance being down, the support around socio-emotional support, and the other resources that our families will need beyond the election cycle. And so we'll be pushing from our platforms to get community leaders more involved and to get various agencies more involved. So that's what we need to do. We were already laying the groundwork as superintendents in urban districts, but we need that support to continue beyond November 3rd.
So Dr. Hinojosa, I know Dallas ISD was working on some efforts before this summer, specifically related to African-American students. Can you talk a little bit about that and how this has changed within the last few months?
Well, almost immediately, our school board got together, in fact, led by our African-American trustees, and they came up with some ideas that they wanted us to consider, and they brought them to us in a very respectful but stern way. And so we started launching on those activities. And yeah, I think the reason you asked the question, why didn't we do this before? And whether it was Operation Connectivity or whether it was a Black Lives Matter, is that unfortunately in this country, sometimes it takes a crisis, and you should never waste a good crisis. You need to take advantage of this crisis to fix the things that are wrong. And what was so encouraging to me, and we've got an action plan, and the board's not letting me off the hook, even though we've had some success. I've got a report back in November, all the things that we've done, very similar to Houston, where we have an initiative where we're recruiting Black males to be teachers in our school, where we have a racial equity office that just did a webinar that was very well received. And by the way, I'm making every chief have one of their SMART goals be about how they're going to improve quantitatively things under their responsibility for African-American males and for all minorities, but especially African-American males, and how we do this improvement. So sometimes it takes a crisis to wake up. But like Dr. Latham said, we're all just looking forward to Tuesday for many reasons. But that's when the work starts, because now we got to deliver, because all we've been doing is complaining about the past. And now the smart people are not going to let us off the hook. And we're responsible for everything. And if we can't make a difference here, then shame on us. And many of us have been working on this for a long time. But now we're not going to have any excuses, because I believe, and what was so inspiring to me, and I would just sit there and just watch CNN and saw all of these people from all of these backgrounds, different, black, white, brown, male, female, they were marching on every city in America, because we're tired of this, and people are saying, we're not putting up with this anymore. And so with or without the government, they're giving the government a chance to deal with this on November. But if they don't, you're going to see marches in the street one way or the other.
So Dr. Elizalde, just coming into Austin, as this moment is happening, what does this mean to you, and how does it make your priorities shift or change, or your approaches as you're, going into this work in Austin, which is a city that has had a lot of African Americans move out because they didn't feel, as comfortable there, or, didn't have the same resources. So they, a lot of folks have moved. So, what is your approach as you're coming into this new role?
Well, Eva, you also started by asking the question, or by making the comment, that all of us on this, in this gallery view right now are all, representative of a particular group of individuals. But we're all outliers. We're not the general rule. And it's not until every one of our students can be on this screen or can be president of the United States, until every single one of our students can replace us, is when we can say, amen, we've done good work. And so just this morning, in part of our executive leadership team meeting, our equity officer was having us do a reading, and I'm going to use a quote that she used with us today from one of the most accomplished African tribes, the Maasai. And they greet each other with the saying, and how are the children? So I think it does have to go back to what our student data actually say from a quantitative standpoint. And why we haven't necessarily done this is, I think we've done a lot of things, but the things that we have done have been very transactional rather than transformative. When you tweak with a system that hasn't met the needs of our students, we're not going to get the transformational outcomes. So to your question, what are we going to do here, is we're going to bring folks together the way they've been brought together, but with a different lens. And that lens being, we cannot talk about transactional changes anymore. They have to be transformative, and they're not reform, they're transforming, because we have to create different outcomes. So we have actually created a plan where we have adopted 8 items that need to be a part of our plan. I think everybody has a vision. And this is a takeoff of my former boss's saying as well. A vision without a plan is a hallucination. And so too often we create these visions without being and drilling all the way down to that disaggregated data. And the truth is, in Austin ISD, because I am significantly different from my 3 colleagues on this screen, is that we do have far fewer economically disadvantaged students in our district. And that doesn't fall short on me. I recognize it because it's a very different environment in which I've been in. But when we disaggregate the data, it is still the same outcomes for students of color that are economically disadvantaged. And there is a way for us to make improvements, but we have to do that collectively. I'm very fortunate that in Austin, individuals such as Nikki Graham, who greeted us earlier today, there are organizations in Austin who assist our district and our students nonstop. I do not think collectively we have done justice to their resources because we haven't brought everyone together to create an overall plan. We're still working in some ways in individual silos, and our goal now is to work through that concept. People support what they help to create. The more folks we bring together to create this actual strategic plan, the more successful our student outcomes will be.
So let me throw this question out there for whoever wants to tackle it first. You know, one of the things that we have seen that has been transformative is early childhood education and getting this focus on pre-K and, you know, across the state, really making it a priority to get high quality pre-K and to get more students enrolled. Well, now we have this pandemic where we see a lot of folks are scared to send their littles. You know, I have nieces that are in kindergarten and, you know, I'm terrified. So, you know, I see this happening across the state. You know, how is this going to impact districts going forward? And is this going to make those gaps even wider in the next few years?
Yeah, let me start since Pedro and San Antonio have been doing great work even before us, but it is one of our strategic initiatives. And our goal is to educate all 4-year-olds full day and all 3-year-olds half day. And it is necessary, but it's not enough because I'm 64 years old. Those kids that are in pre-K now, you know how old I'm going to be when they graduate from high school. I'm going to be 80 years old. I don't have time to wait for that. That's why we have to do P-Tech and all those other things. But you're exactly right. And I'm on calls. Stephanie and I and Pedro and I are on calls. And sometimes Renita joins us every Thursday at 10 o'clock with national superintendents. And attendance was down all over the country, but even more in Texas. Why? Because there's no new jobs in Texas. And because there's no migration and no immigration right now, because nothing is happening. And yes, we had this initiative where we were adding pre-K and K kids every year. And now we're still at like 28% delta of our pre-Kers. We're down to 4% delta of our projected enrollment, but 28% of that is in pre-K. And here, I'll let my other colleagues weigh in, but this is you think about it from the parent perspective. If you're a first-time parent and you have a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, in this time, are you going to hand them off to a stranger that you don't know? Or are you going to just put them on a device all the time? Are you going to make a 3-year-old wear a mask every day? So some parents are saying, you know what, size kid, not right now. I'll be back later. I don't know. We're all grasping at straws. We have Early Matters Dallas that helps us a lot. And we're starting to bring them back. But also what we discovered is that our suburbs have figured out what we're doing. So now Richardson, Mesquite, and Garland have full day pre-K. And so now some of the kids we used to get from there they're staying in their neighborhood because they have their own initiative. So there are a lot of different reasons, but none of the reasons are good. And it is startling about how we're going to handle this for the long term.
Yeah, I would say, we have the largest pre-K program in the county of San Antonio. We have about 5,000 preschoolers, and our enrollment is down 30%. That's consistent with the area. That's consistent with all my colleagues around the country. And for us, the challenge is when we looked at our national data and run our, just where we're at with our assessment scores, we use NWA MAP data. I was proud that we held our own. Like, we didn't see our losses were consistent with the nation, and mainly they were in math and not in ELA. And I can go back and look at the investments we made in pre-K and kindergarten around our literacy initiative, and it's just going to get stronger. But now, because of COVID and because I have 30% of my preschoolers that are literally, as Michael said, the parents are just sitting out. They just decided, I'm not going to send my child to school this year. I'm not going to put my child on a computer. I am worried about the nation as a whole, because we know that children with families of middle-income families and above, they're going to find another way. Whether they put them in a private institution, whether they bring in a retired teacher, or they bring in college. I mean, they're going to find other ways to support their children, and those children are already ahead of our high poverty children. And so, I am worried about what this could do for us in the future. We're already talking about, especially as things get safer, of next year, how do we accelerate these children that are not going to be kindergartners, that they didn't have any preschool? How do we make sure we're on top of that right from the beginning, maybe even bringing them in earlier in the summer? Of course, all this is dependent on what happens with our health metrics and if COVID gets under control.
So let me add, if I can, Eva, because there are two things that right now, well, there are lots of things right now that are keeping me up at night, but one of them is no longer Dr. Hinojosa telling me what other things I have to get done. That's one thing off the list. But One is, so currently, right, we don't have these students that I'm missing nearly 40% of my pre-K3, pre-K4, and even a small percentage of our kindergartners whose parents, and I didn't even think about it when Dr. Hinojosa said, though, we hadn't built relationships with those families. And so this would be the first time they're bringing us their children, and during a pandemic, to a place they don't even know us. So that's probably contributing a great deal. So, okay, let's fast forward, because I'm already, okay, what's my next move? What are we gonna do? How are we gonna prepare? So here are the concerns. We then anticipate that these 4,000, 5,000 students are gonna show up then next fall, which, while right now we have a decline in enrollment, that could mean that we could have probably 70% more of what we would have anticipated. You'd have that entire group of 3-year-olds that are now going to be 4-year-olds that are going to show up, and you're going to have 4-year-olds that were going to be in kindergarten, and they're going to show up, plus the new 3 and 4-year-olds, which means we could actually have a almost 1.5 times what we would typically have as I look at the projections from the demographers. But what funding are we going to have to support that increase in enrollment? Because they're going to be funding us off of the decline that they're going to say we had this year. So while I've had our team thinking, hey, how are you going to accelerate curriculum? How are we going to do progress monitoring? How are we going to make sure never before does every minute for instruction need to mean every minute for instruction, then what next fall will look like? Certainly what it looks like now, but definitely in the fall. So those are the things that it's like, we know it's the best investment, but are we going to have the dollars to provide the quality early learning that we've been able to do the last few years in all of our districts that have produced those results? That really, to me, is a conundrum that I'd really like the state to really think about how they could support us.
Well, I don't believe that Dr. Hinojosa is still not texting you and giving you deadlines and assignments. So good luck with that. But, as we're getting close to time here, I do want to talk, you talked about a little bit about what's keeping you up at night. And, I still get frustrated that I haven't solved all the problems of Texas education. And I've been doing this for a while. And I know there's a lot of frustration, out there at this time in particular. So Dr. Lathan, what, I guess there's some of your top concerns right now, and what's one measurable thing that community groups, the folks that are out there, listening, who are active and engaged, what's one thing that they can do to kind of help move this along and help address some of the issues that we're facing?
I definitely agree with actually all my colleagues. It's funding and worrying about lack of funding next year. We are holding our Harvey, similar conversations we held in Harvey when we saw our enrollment decline and we were prepared for the next year. And so it truly is around and the reason I say it's around funding is because we know our students will need additional supports. They needed it pre-March 2020, and we know we will need to triple in those efforts. And so I'd say for community partners is supporting us, helping us advocate in Austin for sustained funding and additional support. House Bill 3 was great, but we need more than House Bill 3 at this point to help all of the urban districts that are experiencing a decrease in enrollment.
So Pedro, what's keeping you up at night?
Eva, I worry, of course, about just the health, the stress level of our teachers is probably what's keeping me at the most at night, because I know how hard they're working. I see my teachers and they're calling parents and texting our students, talking to our students on sometimes late into the night hours. And they have taken to heart that they're the lifeline to our students, because our students are going through so much, just their social and mental health is just taking such a toll. So I worry about between what our students are going through and our teachers burning out. And so I've been telling our teachers, please play the long game. I know that, they're here in our district because they want to change the lives of our children. Our survey data has been really clear about that. But this is a time when we need to just play that long game. And so I just, that's what worries me the most. It's just, I just don't want my teachers burning out I know they're trying to change the lives of our children.
Dr. Hinojosa?
Well, nothing keeps me up at night, you know. I sleep like a baby. I wake up every 3 hours crying. And then I hit the bottle and I go back to sleep. So I'm good. No, Stephanie, it's worse now. I get up at 3:15 in the morning. I used to get up at 4:50. I can't sleep. But it's not because I'm worried, because I'm trying to solve problems. And, you know, I think we need to take what we've done well. We need to incubate. And then what's working well, then we need to replicate. And then we need to take it to scale. And I think, and here's back to the question of never waste a good crisis. See, educators are
Whatever it was he was going to say, I think it was going to
Yeah, he was about to solve Texas education.
That's always the problem in Texas, right? When we're about to get the answer, something happens. Somebody muted him on purpose.
No, that's actually what he started. The IRS, I can complete part of this, is the IRS. You incubate, you replicate, and then you take to scale. And I think, I don't know which model or project he was going to refer to, but I know that's where his thinking was going.
All right. And Dr. Elizalde, you know, coming into Austin, you know, it's a great opportunity to kind of, you know, rebuild stuff and, you know, really address and change a culture, you know, with all this going on, like, you know, what's your priority for this? And, you know, how do you move forward from here?
Yeah, I actually have to piggyback off of what Pedro talked about with teachers, because I can see it. I've created a district-wide teacher roundtable because being new, I think the new challenge for me is they don't know me any more than I know them. And so working, and it would have been so much easier to do that had there not been a pandemic where I could be, you know, more interactive with them. So I did start this teacher roundtable, and, you know, I think it was really powerful for me. I already knew what the issues were, but when you hear it directly from our front line, from our teachers, and how you can see that they're drained, and they're drained because they're giving everything to our kids, right? And so what's left for them? So I think the reflection with regard to culture right now is, how do we keep refilling their cup? And what are some things we can take off of their plate? Because sometimes there's some things we can remove. And I think now is more important than ever before, a time to see what can we take off, because they are, you know, the idea that some of their kids may try to connect with them via Zoom after school hours, and our teachers are making themselves available. And, you know, so this amount of time of what was already a taxing, you know, profession and a calling has really, I think, I absolutely couldn't agree more that we have to help them with self-care and managing, so that, and, you know, teachers, they're notorious for for wanting everything to be perfect, for achieving and wanting excellence. And this is a time that I have to work with them and say, it's okay that it's not going to be perfect. It's okay. So I think the culture, Eva, around that whole piece is an opportunity for me. I'm not going to see it as an obstacle. I'm going to see it as an opportunity to learn more from them, so that we can work together to improve how they manage and how they lead through this pandemic.
All right, well, I think that's about all the time that we have, and I really appreciate y'all taking the time to chat with me and geek out on education for a little bit. And please, you know, keep up with our coverage at dallasnews.com/edlab. And I look forward to talking with y'all more as the year goes on, and good luck to all of y'all. I'm sending y'all all good vibes. You do not have any.
Thank you, Eva.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, thanks so much.